Welcome back, guys. We are now on to day 3, learning about cells. Okay, so today's aim is what is the composition of plant and animal cells? When we say composition, we're talking about what's the structural makeup of these plants and animal cells. So what makes up these cells? Okay. So now your do now is, what are cells? You can write or draw your response in the space provided below. So go ahead and pause this video, either tell me what a cell is or draw what a cell is, and then press play when you're ready to go over it. All right, so what are cells? Well, based on yesterday's video, you should have been able to answer that cells are the building blocks of life. Or I'll say the building blocks of living things. Okay, because the cell equals the basic unit of life. And if you chose to draw a picture, you should have drawn something that looks like one of these two options. So today we're going to be talking about the differences and the similarities between animal and plant cells. And overall, animal and plant cells are pretty similar, but they do have a few key differences that make them unique. So on the left here, this is a plant cell. And on the right, we have an animal cell. And just at first glance, you should already be able to pick out some key differences between these two cells because they're not identical. Right? We see that plant cells are square and animal cells are more round or circle shaped. And in fact, if we were to look at a slide looking at several plant cells together, we would actually see that they form what almost looks like a brick wall. So you would see a bunch of square cells like this that come together and form, like I said, what almost looks like a brick wall. So it's super, super strong and super, super stable. But if we were to look at a cluster of animal cells, they might be more spread out. They might look a little bit less round, a little bit less uniform. You might just see kind of a bundle of honestly mismatched shapes, okay? And we'll talk about why that happens in just a minute. So now let's talk about what's inside each of these cells. So we're going to go through identifying each of the organelles that each of these letters represents. And we're going to locate them in both the animal and plant cells. So starting off, we have letter A that we need to identify. Okay, so I'm going to highlight that in a navy color. Let's do that one, that looks pretty. Okay, so that's not visible at all. I'm changing my mind, choosing a different color. Let's try this one instead. Okay, so if I go around and circle A in each of these cells, all right, there we go. What I have just highlighted in each of these cells is what we call the cell membrane. Why isn't this typing? There we go. All right, and you should already know a few things about the cell membrane, but I do want you guys to know that this is the outer barrier of the cell. Okay. Additionally, this regulates what goes in and out of the cell. And so because of that, I told you guys that this is kind of like the door of the cell. Remember, if I close and lock that door, you guys aren't getting in this classroom. But if I open the door, you're welcome to come in, right? So the cell membrane is the outer barrier that regulates what comes in and goes out of the cell. Now it does provide, let's see if I can squeeze this in, provides structure. It does provide structure for the cell, but it's more flexible than the cell wall. And that's why we see that these animal cells are a little bit less uniform. than the plant cells are, okay? Because the animal cells don't have the one key structure that makes them rigid. And that is actually going to be our structure. Let's do it in orange. Structure B. So we only find structure B in plant cells, and that's going to be this outer layer of the cell. And we don't see it in the animal cell. So structure B is our cell wall. Okay, and our cell wall is a super tough and rigid structure. And that structure honestly prevents movement. That's why we see that these plant cells look like a solid brick wall, okay? That plant's not going anywhere because that cell wall prevents movement, okay? So it's a tough, rigid structure, and it provides structural support for plant cells. So there's a good reason that we don't have cell walls. And if we had cell walls, we wouldn't be able to move. So that cell wall really prevents movement. Meanwhile, our cell membrane is more flexible. It allows us to move the way that we can. Okay, so this is not found. I'm gonna put a star by it because it's not found in animal cells. All right, moving on to letter C. So C is pointing at, let's see if I can do this neatly. There we go, highlighter. C is pointing at this inside of the cell, okay? So I'm going to do a loose highlight because we have some other organelles we need to identify. But this section that I'm highlighting right here and right here, almost done. There we go. All right, what I've just highlighted in yellow is known as the cytoplasm. Ooh. Okay, one of these days I'm gonna get it, hold on. There we go. All right, C is the cytoplasm. So what do we know about the cytoplasm? Well, it's a jelly-like or gel-like structure for, let's say, the filling of the cell. And this is where we find all of our organelles. So these organelles just kind of float around inside of the cytoplasm. How can I say this? Where we find organelles. Okay. And this is almost, if you've ever had Jell-O, the cytoplasm is basically the consistency of Jell-O. And if you've ever seen one of those really nasty Jell-O cakes, I feel like this is something that grandmothers make, where it's like on a platter and the Jell-O's on top and there's some fruit floating around inside. It's not appetizing, I'll say that. That's basically what a cell looks like. So the Jell-O in that case is like our cytoplasm, and the fruit inside are like the organelles that are suspended in that gel. And another thing you do need to know is that our cytoplasm is made mostly of water. All right, moving on to D. So structure D, let's do this in purple, which is my favorite color in case anyone was wondering. Structure D, I'll highlight it here. We find in both the animal and plant cells. And this is a structure we call the vacuole. And the vacuole is mainly used for storage. So it's used to store excess water, excess food, and even excess waste. But you should notice one key difference between the animal and plant vacuoles, and that's that the plant cell has a huge vacuole. It's so big that it's even called the great vacuole, okay? It's massive. And the reason it's so big inside that plant cell is because plant cells have to reserve or hold on to more water than animal cells do, okay? So it's much larger in plant cells because it has to hold plants have to hold on to more water. So this is the reason why if you forget to water a house plant, after a few days, it's gonna start drooping, right? And that's because the cells have lost the water that they need. But if you give it water again before it's too late, you'll see that that plant leaf starts to go back up and become more rigid. So that's actually, you'll see the vacuoles either running out of water or then filling back up, okay? So that's why the vacuole has to be so much bigger, is to hold on to that excess water that keeps the plants alive. All right, next up we've got structure E. So structure E, let's use this light blue color. Structure E we see in both the animal and plant cells. And it looks basically the same in both. Structure E is pointing to the nucleus. Okay, and the nucleus is like the brain of the cell. It's the control center. So it controls everything that happens in the cell, and that's because it contains the instructions. So it contains genetic information. And we call those genetic instructions DNA. Okay, so those look pretty similar in the plant and animal cells, but in both cases, it's like the brain or the control center of the cell. It controls everything that's happening inside. All right, next up we've got F. Now we only see structure F inside the plant cell. Oh, I can add, oh, I thought that said stickers. I almost got really excited. All right, so structure F, we see right here. And we only see it in the plant cell. And that's because structure F is the chloroplast. Okay, so the chloroplast is where photosynthesis happens. And we'll talk more about photosynthesis in the future, but you just need to know that this is basically how the plants turn sunlight into food. Okay, and the chloroplasts also contain what we'd call chlorophyll. And this is a pigment or a color that makes plants green. All right. But once again, we only find that in plant cells. So I'm going to put a star by that one. This is not found in plant cells, or wow, not found in animal cells. So unfortunately, if I stand by the window and raise my arms to the sky, I'm not going to feel full because that sunlight can't turn into food for me. It's a shame, honestly. All right, and finally, letter H. So H is found in both plant and animal cells. I'm gonna do that in pink. I'm gonna circle the organelle right here and right here. So structure H looks almost like a little bean structure, okay? And that structure is going to be, called the mitochondria. So remember, this is the powerhouse of the cell. And when I say it's the powerhouse of the cell, I mean that it creates energy. Specifically, the type of energy it creates is ATP, okay? And you don't really need to know this yet, but the process by which it creates ATP is called cellular respiration. Okay, so mitochondria gives us energy through cellular respiration, and this is found in both plant and animal cells. All right, so the other ones that I have not gone over, ignore letters G, I, and J. You guys won't need to know those this year. All right, I believe that that's all I have for you today. So using that information, you should be able to tell me, what is the composition of plant and animal cells? Okay, so to go over what we just learned, as always, please complete this exit ticket. Let's see if there's anything else you need to know. Nope, that's it. So fill out these notes, complete your exit ticket, and have a wonderful day. I'll see you guys soon.